Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm here along with Satya as we try and break down how to program functional bodybuilding. It's a topic we get asked about often. I particularly have been asked about it over the years, ever since the release of my first functional bodybuilding online training program called Awaken Training Series. See, if you've ever done functional bodybuilding workouts before or followed one of our training programs from start to finish, you've probably noticed there's a lot going on. From the movement selection to the tempos to the way the conditioning is structured, variation on what you typically see is there. So what goes into all of that? So I'm going to break down my perspective on this. Join us for this conversation on how FBB group designs are created and hopefully what you can take away for yourself to upgrade your experience as an athlete, a thinking athlete, and possibly even as a coach if you're out there in the fitness world trying to make people healthier and more fit. All right, enjoy. Okay, welcome back to the Functional Bodybuilding Lab. We're in studio for the 5th podcast that we've recorded here. Things are going really smoothly, more and more smooth every week. Less sweat, less stress, more enjoyment, better conversations. If you're listening to us on one of the audio platforms for podcasts, please know that if you go over to functional.bodybuilding on YouTube, our YouTube channel has video recordings of our podcasts where you can capture some of the nuances that happen with hand gestures, facial expressions,
bodily fluids.
Yeah, I don't have coffee today. I kind of got my coffee in already, so hopefully that's not what's spiking my, adrenaline and sweat glands when we're up here talking. But Satya, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I have tea today.
Okay,
yeah.
Tea and water.
Yeah,
You got the double. I don't have anything to drink, so hopefully I survive these.
You can have some water if you want.
I got my trusty yellow notepad and my brand new Apple 12 Pro iPhone Pro Max. Thing is powerful. You can program workouts from that. Speaking of, today we're going to be diving into the intentions, thoughts, and planning that go into program design of group workouts. So I think that's what we want to lean into today.
Yeah. How
we implement functional bodybuilding principles into programming. I guess me specifically, since I do that. You're not the programming expert yet, although, man, in 5 years, 6 years, you've learned quite a bit just by trying to digest what I say and write it on emails. That's been pretty interesting to see. I'll bet you could write some pretty sweet workouts if you just took a stab at it.
Maybe after this podcast.
Maybe. Let's go. Whiteboard session. What prompted this question from you, Satya? This was your idea.
Yeah, well, I see a lot of comments and questions come up on social media and in our programs, the messages that are being sent to athlete support and that kind of thing. And people are always really curious. How do you write a functional bodybuilding workout? What are all the themes that you're thinking about? How do you select movements? How do you select tempos? How does it all fit together in your mind?
Yeah, and you get that. Is your take that those are questions that are coming from just general fitness enthusiasts, participants, or people that are actually like participants, but they're also coaching on the side as well?
I think some of both, because we really push this model of the thinking athlete, the idea of the thinking athlete, who is someone who doesn't just follow everything as written, no matter what it is, but who's able to have a relationship with the training program day to day, and in the moment be able to adjust and auto-regulate for how you're feeling that day, your own particular limitations, what your own goals are. And so I think knowing more about what goes into a program design really helps illuminate for people what the ingredients are and how to manipulate them in a way that benefits them.
Yeah, and I think that the past number of years, I don't even know what the time frame has been, but there's been an elevation in the consciousness of the fitness community that there's power behind the design of workouts. That can really mean a lot. You know, you have a lot of different people stepping up
to claim expertise on the, their training philosophy or their programming methodology. And hey, if you follow this program, it's that, and you get these kinds of results. I do believe that with a negative experience in a program that's not very thoughtful, I don't want to call it a bad program, it's just not a thoughtful program, it will teach somebody quickly, hey, like, man, this is not good. Like, I need something more thoughtful, more connected from day 1 to day 30 to day 60. And where you find that, you're finding more and more people doing that or trying to, and those that don't do it are thirsty to understand how to do it because their clients demand it. They are like, I just don't want to show up and just have a random, spattering of exercises put up in front of me that I'm just supposed to go hard, in quotes, with. I'd like to have a better progression, a better roadmap to what I'm doing. And I really credit my early days in, the years of training and the years of athletic experience that I had. I got to experience good programming and randomness and all the different types of stuff. And I ran into some of my biggest frustrations early on with CrossFit, actually, when I was a very balanced, well-rounded athlete as I saw it, came in and started to do CrossFit.com workouts. And I struggled to understand and be able to execute everything on the schedule that was prescribed at this level that was considered elite. I was getting buried. I was getting injured. I was getting tired. I'd do great for 12 days and then I'd be a wreck. And I really was I was thirsty for something that made more sense in the week-to-week progression. Now, could I come back in 3 years and then revisit that? That was my goal. It was like, I want to build up the skills to do it. This didn't seem like the right way to get there. This seemed like the most powerful test of fitness. And that led me through a number of different online, resources when I then landed upon a blog. And this blog was the Big Dogs blog, or the Optimum Performance Training blog, which was the origins of OPT, which is now OPEX Fitness. And I started following this blog many, 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 many years ago. And there was this sense of like, wow, we're exploring new things here. I could tell that James, who was writing this, was experimenting. But he wasn't just randomly experimenting. It was like, let me experiment with a concept in a thoughtful sequence of progression. And through that, I learned a tremendous amount about fitness, about myself. I saw where my limitations were. I could see week after week progression. And I kind of latched onto that early on as like, this is how I want to train. This is what I think could benefit so many other people, is not being so completely married and wedded to old methods of linear progression and overload, but let's take those principles and let's apply this, this whole new world of thing that we're calling CrossFit, which is totally chaotic, and let's bridge the gap between chaos and between rigid structural, progressions that got people great body composition and strength and gold medals for decades. But now there's this kind of two things. And so it was like he was like the pioneer in my mind of bridging those gaps, because he had 15, 20 years of exercise science background and then was the champion of this new chaotic world. And he's like, well, I want to play around with it. So big credit to James for that and for introducing me to this concept, which then I brought to the next 12 years of coaching. And it's just evolved. It's evolved. And I started writing my first group program designs in 2011. I was tasked with the job of, you write the program for our it was at one point 4 CrossFit gyms that were all underneath the same brand with 500 members. So that was like a scary proposition. It was like, whoa, I got to write I got to write the workout that 500 people are going to be like, I don't like this workout. Oh, that was so much fun. Oh man, my legs are hurting. Like, oh, I got a stiff back now. And I was like, this is, so I took on that responsibility early, and 10 years of experience doing that is what goes into every program that I write. It's not like, how do you do it, Marcus? How do you write program? I'm like, well, I'll try and sum up the last 10 years in, a podcast, but it's difficult. And there's no replacing experience of program design for many, many people, and then being a good student of the feedback and getting the feedback and saying, what's working, what's not, how is this better, how is this not better, did I try and improve something and then make it worse? And those are the thoughts that have been going on for the past decade.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. One thing that comes to mind that you've said in the past is that anybody can write a workout that puts you on the floor and totally crushes your soul.
Yeah.
But it's more of an advanced skill to write something that will actually progress someone's fitness and feel good for them to do. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about how, when you were talking about how back in the early days of when we started working together, you had written the very first draft or iteration of Awaken Training Series, which was our flagship program. And I was starting to do some of the training in my basement to try it out. Mm-hmm. And my mind was blown because I was seeing the entire program of where it was going over the 12 weeks. I had access to all the workouts, so I could see where the progressions were going. And I was actually experiencing it day to day. And I think anyone who's experienced a functional bodybuilding workout from start to finish, not necessarily taking one of your workouts from Instagram and just going and trying one piece, but taking the warm up and the strength and the conditioning from start to finish, that's a very unique feeling, at least for me, that I've encountered among different strength training programs that I've tried. So I think that a common experience for people who are trying it for the first time, they can immediately see, wow, there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of thoughtfulness. There's a particular art to the way that you blend movements. And so I think that people would love to hear, at least, I know you can't sum up the last decade plus of experience, but in terms of some broad themes and some things that you think about when you're putting training programs together, I think people would love to hear those details.
Yeah, man. 6 years ago we wrote that, or 5 years ago. Either way, it was that was an exciting time, and just one more nod to another really influential person. From 2014 to 2016, I worked with a coach named Mike Lee, who really transformed my thinking about program design and was a big part of the reason why functional bodybuilding is here today. He helped me through a period of time where my training personally needed to transform dramatically, and he was creative, he was forward thinking, and he was not married to any one school of thought, and he helped me to redesign my own personal, fitness journey to incorporate what is now functional bodybuilding today and what we've taken and run with. So that period of time was illuminating, and so how do I build training programs? I always call them my personal experience. What have I done in the past? What has worked for me? And then how do I distill down the actual essence of what worked for me to the components that would work for everybody? Because it's not true that it would work for everybody if it worked for me. That's very far from the truth. But there are elements of what have worked for me or what worked for you that can work for everybody as long as you understand what that is. So let's take a workout like a classic CrossFit workout like the Filthy 50. Okay, the Filthy 50 is, I want to say it's 10 exercises, 50 repetitions of each, performed as a chipper, and you do it as fast as you can. There's everything from wall balls to burpees to GHD hip extensions to toes to bar, lunges, so body weight, weighted movements, the whole nine. Now that, for the right person, at my peak of training, I remember I did that workout unbroken. I did every exercise without stopping. The hardest one of those was the 50 knees to elbows. I remember that was rough. But once you got through that, so I did that workout in like 12 minutes, it was super competitive time. And I didn't like die doing it. It was like good training for me outside of the 50 knees to elbows, which really put the hurt on. But I'm like, okay, that's a great workout. What did that do for me, and how did I get some value out of that? Well, having the skill to do all these exercises, number one, made it important. It made it accessible to me. I could do this in an aerobic setting. I did 12 minutes or 13 minutes of filthy 50 unbroken, and I was aerobic the whole time, never getting close to failure, except for the knees to elbows. I've said that 3 times now. Okay. Go look up the workout. It's epically hard to do 50 knees to elbows after what you've did. Okay. But there's very few people on the planet at that time, even today, that were going to get that same dose response from that workout. But what was great about that workout for me at the time, okay, performing a chipper of movements at an aerobic pace. That's one, it's really fun. 2, it gives you as the program design coach the opportunity to, hit a variety of different movement patterns that could be great for a squatting and a pulling day, that could be great for a hinging and a pushing day. Okay, so that's another component of that. And then there's the time domain. It's like, okay, this is a time domain that fits for what we're doing for a build of like, we want people to be in the 10 to 15. So I can take that training session or that workout and I can say, okay, well, for general population or for this group of people, let's adjust the skills of that workout. Let's make it less difficult and more like, 50 burpees for one individual could take 10 minutes. Like, I don't want to bog somebody down inside of a workout, but I want to give them the same chipper format. I want to give them the same aerobic response, and I want to expose them to a variety of different movements within the same workout because that's fun and engaging, and that keeps them consistent in their training. So again, I'm just talking about how you distill out different aspects of workouts to determine what makes this applicable to everybody else. Because this, again, is what I have always felt like is one of my skills as a coach is I go and experience things. I come away from that and I say, what about that experience can 100 other people benefit from? And that is how I continue to explore training, writing programs, and then researching the last 20 years of my training experience is like, okay, reconnect to what that felt like. That could really benefit a lot of people. And all of those concepts that really can benefit a lot of people is what makes functional bodybuilding. It's what makes the method. Those are the methods that we bring together. And then what it looks like on paper when the workout for Persist goes out is through this filter of how is this helping a lot of people, not just Marcus at his peak in 2015 when he was training for the games.
So if someone is going to get a takeaway of a question that they can ask themselves when they're in training that will help illuminate a concept or what was the stimulus, how would you put it to words into what questions should people be asking themselves if they want to get more insights from their own experience that they can take away?
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, because those are the questions that I asked myself every day on the Big Dogs blog back in early, optimumperformancetraining.ca, right? It was like, okay, we're doing a superset of snatch grip RDLs and bench press. So I'm just following the prescription. I'm just doing exactly what's there. The tempo 3-1-X2. I'm doing exactly what it says for the bench press. I'm resting the right amount of time. I got my clocks on, and then as I'm in the movements and I'm in the workout, I'm like just connecting with my body. Like, what am I feeling? What's working? What part of my body is getting like tension? Oh my gosh, when you put those two exercises together, when you're doing a snatch grip RDL and bench press, your upper back gets so fatigued when you do the snatch grip RDL. That's also the same group of muscles that stabilizes for bench press. Oh, wow. Now I have to flex my lats when I'm on the bench, but my lats and my upper traps and my traps are all smoked from the snatch grip deadlift. Like, that's a very interesting combination. And it was those thoughts that helped me to really get more, I think, out of the training, but also understand programming principles for later. It was like, whoa, it's those combinations that make for a great stimulus. It's that superset. It's that couplet, right? When you go into a conditioning piece, that was one of the things that I believe as a CrossFitter, I have an advantage over many coaches out there that never did CrossFit but are high-level strength coaches, is that I played a sport where variety and randomness was just part of the game. I signed up for it. It maybe was not the best thing for my body at the time, but it was awesome and fun, and I learned a lot. What I learned a ton about, though, was exercise combinations. Most people are like stuck in a very classic way of thinking. Like, you do squats and strict pull-ups. You do, on chest day, you do bench, you do incline, then you do a decline, then you do a fly, and then I did bench and burpees and dips on the same day. I did bench, burpee, row as fast as I can. I did all the combinations. And there were some aha moments in there where I was like, nobody else is thinking to do this, but this is an incredible dose for the chest and the triceps. Doing bench press into fast burpees, like the fastest burpees you can, where you're dropping to the floor powerfully, using hip flexion to get yourself down to the ground. What does that equate to? That equates to you catching yourself on the floor with this massive eccentric load to your chest and then springing up with like an explosive push-up as fast as you can. Do that after 3 to 6 heavy close grip bench presses, and then couple that with a row, like on the Concept 2 erg, where you're pulling. Now it's this combination. It's like push and pull. You're doing a pull at high threshold. You get a ton of different, responses. So that's the takeaway for anybody who's interested in the application of this stuff. And this is what I've taught all of our coaches is, hey, Marcus, what are you supposed to be feeling when you do that? I'm like, go and feel it. Go and feel it. And that's the level of detail that you want to think and ask those questions. It's like, oh, how are those two muscle groups or movement patterns affecting this muscle group? Another classic example from the years of doing this is anytime there was a lot of pushing or upper body stability stuff that had to be done, and then you had to go do lots of double unders. And double unders are like, maybe people outside of CrossFit don't do a lot of double unders, but it's this exercise that requires a lot of posterior, shoulder, deltoid, and kind of scapular rotator cuff stability muscles, like working, as well as skill and aerobic capacity. But when you got to do, let's say, a wall walk where you're walking yourself up and down the wall, that's a lot of scapular stability and strength and shoulder pressing right into double unders. That combination suddenly just, whoa, like that has a potent effect. Such a potent effect that I've known this for years. That what did they do this year in the Open? That was a workout in the Open. They're like, well, we're going to introduce the wall walk and we're going to do it with double unders because that thing is nasty. Now, it doesn't have to be nasty every time you put it in a workout, but you can understand, okay, these combinations really have a unique stimulus, and I want to use that thoughtfully on top of foundational progressions and principles of overload that make sense for just about everybody because they've been done for decades.
Okay, so you've noticed a potent chest combination, let's say, and you want to take that into a workout. Would you prioritize the strength piece? Would you prioritize conditioning? How do you decide what to emphasize when you're going to put that together?
Yeah, that's a good question. So now we can sort of, we've laid the foundation of like, where does this all come from? How do you even get good at program design? It takes experience. You have to do it yourself. You have to practice yourself and then coach people and then learn what are the right questions to be asking when you're out doing the training. If you're in Persist or you're doing functional bodybuilding, you have a FBB master coach, what could you be thinking about? Now it's like, okay, how do we put it all together? Well, putting it all together, I think for me, goes back to some of those very foundational principles of, design that I think my coaches over the years when I was a CrossFit athlete always followed. It was like we trained with movement pattern splits. This was the simplest way to just make sure we weren't overstressing any one movement pattern or joint, so that we could have more longevity in the sport, so we could recover better on a weekly basis, and so we could hit high intensity on something and truly max out without worrying about how it would impact other parts of training during the week. So that could be like squatting and pulling on Monday. Now, for like a beginner, that could be like goblet squats and ring rows. When I was an advanced trainee, it was back squats, heavy cleans, and muscle ups, right? So there's a lot of different ways to like organize squatting and pulling, but then, break things out. So squat pull on Monday, Tuesday was often overhead push, Wednesday we would come back and do a bit more of like hinging, Thursdays were active recovery days, Fridays were another squat heavy snatch day, and then Saturdays were just sort of like an overall upper body and conditioning heavy day. And in CrossFit as a sport, we always had overlap. You were expected to do everything every single day. We just had a little bit of a bias on those days to make sure we didn't do overkill. But I go back to some of those original splits that I use for myself and for clients, and I just map out, this is what I want the week to look like. And then within each training session, I want to provide people with an opportunity to express athleticism or do something fast and fun and challenging. I want people to slow down and focus on movement quality and building foundational strength. And then I want people to condition in some way, and that has a wide definition, but conditioning is performing movements at a variety of different metabolic stress levels. So high metabolic stress, or like pushing for high power lactic training, versus like steady state cardio or aerobics. Those all fall within the idea of conditioning. And I tend to bias towards more and more days of aerobic spectrum training, where we can then implement the movements of that particular day, that pattern. So on a Monday, we'll do aerobic power training sessions that have squatting and pulling in it. It could look like biking with some wall balls and some farmer's carries. And that hits that same pattern as the squats and the ring rows that they did in their strength and their balance. And then for that like athleticism, fun expression, that might be like some jumping mechanics that they're working on, jumping onto a box. So I have a blueprint for the week. I have kind of a blueprint for what the day is going to entail. And then once that's set, then I look at how long is this thing going to last? Is this going to be 12 weeks of training? Is this going to be 6 weeks of training, or somewhere in the middle? And from week 1 to week 10, for example, I want to see opportunities for the client to make measurable progress. And again, anchoring in some of those original like periodization models and concepts that have been around for decades and decades, you want to see maybe opportunities for weight progression to happen. So in an early week in the training cycle, we're biasing loads and tempos and rep ranges that are lighter. 10 reps at 3030 tempo, 60 seconds of straight work. I don't care how strong you are, you're going to have to dial back your weights. But by the last week of the training cycle, the tempo is 20xo for the same exercise. So it's a 3-second rep, and you're only doing 2 to 3 reps. So now you have a chance to load heavier. And you got there in more of a linear way, where it didn't just like jump up, 50% in weight overnight. Same thing goes for conditioning progressions. It might be, okay, over the course of 6 to 10 weeks, I want to make sure that they're doing 2 to 4 more minutes worth of work by the end. So they increase by 30 seconds every week. Or maybe there's a couple more repetitions in there each week. Or maybe there's just harder movements each week. The first week you're doing air squats and ring rows for 10 minutes, and the last week you're doing goblet squats and strict pull-ups for 10 minutes. And that's a way of progressing. When I'm designing for a group, because I don't have a group consensus on what's the goal, I have to think in terms of generalities like that. And then I layer on my personal experience. So on the day where we do upper body pushing, and let's say it's a push and hinge day. Okay, so pushing and hinging is like bench press and deadlifts. Now, I'm going to look at the fulls, like maybe over the course of 12 to 20 weeks. We're going to do this on Wednesday. If somebody just says bench press and deadlift for 20 weeks, that gets extremely monotonous, and likely that no matter how many ways you change the variables, you can't see linear progression for that long unless you're a newbie, right? Even then, it could be a problem. You might plateau. So we'll break that into chunks, and we'll try and take those patterns, and that's where I get to interject all these years of experience of like, okay, we'll do bench press and deadlift like as just a superset for 6 weeks to build a base. Then we'll move into bench press and power clean, but we're going to change the angle of the bench press, and now instead of doing a deadlift, we're doing a power clean. And then we're going to go into bench press rowing supersets and power clean burpee supersets. And so those are like same movement patterns, but that's a different stimulus and another way to level up. And I guess level up, like progress, right? Because again, I'm arbitrarily setting what the progression is. Like nobody said, hey, at the end of this, I want to be great at doing power cleans and burpees. They said, I love functional bodybuilding. I want to stay fit. I want to look good, move well. And I'm like, yeah, this can do it. And then by the end, we might do, a 1 rep max bench press. And then we might do for time 21, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3 of bench press and rowing. And then we might do, a power clean ladder, right? And so it's like all of that stayed inside of the original model and the original idea of like, Wednesday's going to be this day where we do these 2 movement patterns. I want to make sure that there's room enough to progress. We're going to do it over this 12 to 20 weeks. We're going to change formats often enough that people are staying engaged and they can continue to progress, but not so often that every week is different and there's no linearity, if that's a word, to where we're going with the training.
Awesome. As a last takeaway, is there any advice you would give people to not make some of the common training or programming mistakes that you may have made or that you see commonly being made out there?
Sure. Yeah. I think depending on where you come from, what your background is. My background in program design started really with CrossFit. Is far too much variance that I was thinking was required. I got to do something new every single day. And that really didn't work. In practicality and application for the sport of fitness, it was required. We needed to be ready for that, but in execution and getting the skills and the tools to be able to be good at CrossFit, it wasn't necessary. And athletes like that are winning the games today, you look at their program concepts that they used in their peak years, it was just like every day, ride the bike a lot, every day, just do the same movements over and over again just to get good at it. It wasn't like changing everything. It was a lot of foundation. So for people programming, you don't have to rewrite it every single day. Small, subtle progressions win the game, and they keep people engaged. And don't assume that people need something crazy new every day. They want to experience success, and success often comes much quicker if there's some consistency to the training and not constant variance and variety. And if you're from the world of like, I give people straight sets every single day of the same things and it's always the same, then stretch yourself to go out and experience more in the gym with how you train yourself to learn and ask some of the questions that we kind of laid out here. How could that thing I just did fit into, how could that replace my deadlift and bench press day that I give to 90% of my clients? Not that you need to replace it for every one of those clients, but that at some point, some of those clients might be ready for something new, and they might value a different look at the same stimulus or a slightly similar stimulus to bench pressing and deadlifts.
Great. Well, if you want to experience how it's done in functional bodybuilding, I love this aspect of the Persist training program where we include coaching notes on every single workout. So you get a little bit of insight as you train into what you're thinking, as you program it, and learn how to feel it more for yourself.
Yeah, that was something that we've been aiming to do more of, is supply more of like the intention behind it. So you can think your way through like, what should I be feeling? But that's not to limit you either. Like, just because I say, hey, I want you to think about, how it feels on your ankles to get into this Cossack squat, there could be something else you're feeling, like your core or your adductors or, something else. So anyway, yeah, Persist is a great place to go and explore that. And if you got some questions or something that we discussed today was interesting enough to you to want follow-up on, please send us a message, slide into the DMs, get onto the Facebook group, and or join Persist and Ask in the True Coach platform.
Yes, please do.
See you next time.